Hi, and welcome to The Singer's Process, Session 6. I had the privilege recently of sitting down and having a conversation with a very gracious and talented man, the pianist Mike Wofford. As an instrumentalist, a composer, a conductor, an arranger, Mike's done it all. He's been the accompanist and conductor for Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Christy. He's recorded with Mel Tormey and worked with Cher. We sat down and had a conversation on that creative relationship between an accompanist and a singer, what he expects from a singer, and what a singer should expect from him. He shares his thoughts and his insights and his experience, and I'm thrilled to be able to share this with you. So check it out. Here's my interview with Mike Wofford.
Decided run along somewhere far away off and make it snappy. Oh, how I long to be the girl I used to be. Fascinating rhythm, oh, won't you stop picking on me? Fascinating rhythm, you got me on the go.
Well, welcome to The Singer's Process, Session 6. I am here with Mike Wofford, a wonderful and local legend here in San Diego, an accompanist, an instrumentalist. He has worked with all the greats, Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald, Christy. Thank you for being here on The Singer's Process and helping me out today.
My pleasure,
Thank you,
Lillian.
Mike.
It's great to be with you again.
Thank you.
We've worked together.
Yes,
for
we
years,
have.
I think.
I know. We
Yeah.
met in the mid-90s through Dan at the Athenaeum. Atkinson. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I approached him to do a concert there. You know, what did I know? I just walked in with my cassette tapes and said, here's my demo. And he hooked me up with you.
Yeah.
And I remember telling people, because I really didn't know who you were, you know, and at that time. And everyone I told, I said, well, I'm going to be working with an accompanist and pianist named Mike Wofford. And they're like, oh, Lillian, you better have your stuff together when you're working with him. And I was like, oh my God, well, who's that guy? And, you know, and I remember you were so gracious and so wonderful working with me. And I was starting out in a different kind of genre because I grew up in musical theater. And doing the American songbook for me was a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember you put me at ease, which I think is so important for a singer, that creative relationship that we built, and it's a musical bond in a lot of ways.
Yes, it is.
And I remember, I'll never forget that. I still have the program. In fact, I'll dig it up. Yeah, I'll dig it up. It's in a box somewhere. I'll dig it up.
Dust it off.
Yeah, dust it off and put it on this video.
Yeah.
That just reminded me of that.
Okay.
So, I mean, you've traveled the world conducting and accompanying these wonderful people.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've worked with great vocalists, and each in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's been, yeah.
How did you meet Ella Fitzgerald?
I just got a phone call one day from her manager,
Oh, that's nice.
who had been with her forever, just about. And I had already worked with Sarah Vaughan for about 4 years. I'd had enough of the road for a while, so I had just come back to San Diego to stay. So anyway, he called one day while I was back in San Diego and wondered if I wanted to come up and at least spend a little time with Ella Fitzgerald and see how it might work out. And I said, well, yeah, it'd be interesting, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Because I, like everyone, have been a huge fan of hers for her whole career, you know. So I did. I drove up to LA to her home, and we got together and talked, and that was pretty much it.
So you just talk, you didn't sit at the piano. She already knew your work, I'm sure.
No, not the first time. We just very briefly she was a very quiet person, and not so much on stage, but off stage she was kind of on the quiet side. So, but anyway, we seemed to hit it off, and so I got back to her manager and said, you know, I'd like to do it if the job is open. So I ended up being with her for 4 years.
Nice. So let me ask you this, I'm curious. What did you guys talk about in that first meeting? Was it all about music or just about everything?
We just kind of got to know each other a little bit in her living room there at her home, and I didn't stay too awfully long. You know, it was fairly brief, and she was nice. And then shortly thereafter, I actually started working with her, you know, and it was a wonderful 4 years.
How do you see your relationship, your musical relationship with a singer?
First of all, you have to have hopefully heard enough of them, whether it's an Ella Fitzgerald or a young person coming up, a young unknown, you know. But you have to try to understand their individual personalities and what makes them feel comfortable and reassured, and that you are the right person for them, you know, because it doesn't always work, you know. Some accompanists just are not a fit with certain vocalists, you know. So, but there's an early getting comfortable with each other, and obviously doing some rehearsing and playing together, not just talking, you know. So I would go up to Ella's house. I would drive up, as I said, from San Diego. We'd rehearse a little, but for the most part, she really was not all that hot on long rehearsals and that sort of thing. She really liked to keep it relatively short and to the point, and she saved it for the stage, really. You know, we didn't spend a lot of time off stage at all.
Yeah, just working it so it's fresh when you hit the stage.
Yeah.
You know,
so
beat it to death.
Yeah, she didn't really need any help at that point.
Yeah, that point.
And you know,
who would you like me to play for you? Yes.
No, and she knew exactly what she wanted, and so I tried to really be appropriate with you know, what her needs were, and so on. The first concert we had was in Northern California, kind of in the Bay Area, at a winery, as I remember. It was an outdoor concert, obviously. Her bassist at the time was a wonderful bassist. Keter Betts was his name, very well known in the business. And he had been with her for years. And so I, without even really any kind of a real rehearsal or anything, I played my first engagement with Ella at this beautiful outdoor stage. Then we went on and did a couple more things in the general Northern California area at various venues, and I could tell about the second or third day that I was working with her, she would kind of look over at me as we were playing a tune of one of her, you know, something from her repertoire, and she would just kind of look over and make kind of a face, and I just had the feeling that something wasn't right, you know, something wasn't working, and so when at the end of that concert, this was, as I say, it was the first or second one that I'd worked with her, I said to Keter, you know, I don't feel comfortable with Ella. I don't feel like she's really real comfortable with me yet. And of course, we had just started, so that's a process anyway. But he said, well, if you really want to know, I'll tell you exactly what's probably happening. He said, you have to. He knew I had been with Sarah, you know, before Ella, and he said Ella came up in the big band era, and because she was a few years older than Sarah, Sass as everyone called her, and he said she came up in the big band era, and you know, Basie and all the great big bands of the time, and that's what she wants to hear. And I realized as Keeter and I talked, it was pretty clear. I was playing jazz piano with her because I had been with Sarah, and she came out of the bebop era. Sarah was just enough years younger than Ella. She was not primarily so much associated with big bands, but with small groups and bebop, modern jazz as they call it, you know. And so he said she doesn't want to. What she needs is to hear a big band behind her, which I got right away. I understood what he was talking about.
So what does that mean?
Well, not to get too technical about it, but playing big band piano behind a singer would be more chordal and punchy and really strong, not bebop. In other words, coming out of the bebop era, as Sarah did, she was fine with someone playing single lines and you know, behind
kind of what I call noodling a little bit.
You know, and not necessarily so full and heavy.
Right.
You know.
She wanted a nice strong Italian meat sauce, right? She wanted to have those flavors.
But so, you know, once Keeter had just set me down and explained that to me, it made perfect sense. And from that day on, 4 years later, I was still with her, and we never ever had an argument or a misunderstanding about anything that I can remember. She was very easy to work with and all. But that initial situation that I didn't understand until Keeter explained it to me. I don't know if I would have lasted with her another month if I hadn't known that, you know.
And she was not one to come up to you directly. She always used her manager or other musicians that had worked with her a lot and said, "Hey, can you do it this way or that way?"
No, it wasn't in her nature to.
Okay.
She would have let me go before she would have had a talk about it, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so. But she was always super and treated me great. But I've mentioned that anecdotally before in situations with writers and people that are interested in her history, and it always comes to me. I think it's kind of an interesting, unusual story.
Well, it makes perfect sense because as a singer, what you want to hear in any particular tune or style of music, you know, and then you're not getting it, it throws you off.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and like, well, I'm not hearing that hit there or the lushness of those chords there, so I can harmonize with you as well as a singer. So from my point of view, on the other side of the piano is that when you're playing, when an accompanist is playing, for me, I want to harmonize with you and see where I fit in that chord. If the textures and the colors that we can overlap and match with one another, for me is very important. So that's a lesson in itself, isn't it?
Well, of course.
Yeah. You know. And what do you expect from a singer on the other side?
Well, there are so many areas you could go into, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody's personalities, of course, are different, and some people are very, very easy to work with and very, you feel comfortable right away.
Yeah.
Others are not necessarily and don't always
take it that well.
Yeah, you know. Those are just personality traits. They don't have so much to do with the music per se itself.
Right.
You have to have your antenna out and try to be aware. You know, not a matter of becoming a mind reader.
No, because nobody is.
Yeah. But, you know, you get a feeling for various vocalists if you spend any time at all with them, rather than just maybe one performance or something. But if you spend any time with them, you gradually get a feel for what they need and what they don't need, and what they like and what they don't like, you know. And a lot of it you don't even really have to talk about. I mean, if the pianist or the accompanist is sharp and has any experience at all themselves, they can pretty much sort that out quickly. You know, it's not something you have to talk about over and over. But I was very fortunate. I was trying to remember. I don't think Sarah, for instance, ever. I don't remember her ever telling me how to play or what to do or what not to do. You know, it may be the bigger. In some cases, I don't know if it's the bigger the star or the performer. In this case, vocalists. They are the more confident in themselves. It's not always the case, but typically I think more confident in themselves, so that they're not on pins and needles.
Right.
They're comfortable that you are a professional and you know what you're doing as an accompanist, or you wouldn't be there.
Right, exactly. They may not come up to you and go, "Oh, I love you, you're marvelous and wonderful."
Yeah.
But they're the ones that hired you.
Yeah.
Essentially, they have the last word.
Someone young and new and inexperienced as a vocalist may be a nervous wreck, and not really able to flow with what you as the pianist are doing. You know. And this applies to guitar as well, I think, as far as accompanying vocalists.
So for a young pianist coming up today, an accompanist for a vocalist, what advice, what would you say to them, or what you've learned over the years?
You have to understand, how much experience they've had, the vocalists in question, and whether they, for instance, can play some themselves instrumentally, or whether they don't at all. That can have some bearing on their strengths and experience and so on. It's not necessary, it's not a crucial factor, but it can have some bearing on.
And that old adage, less is more.
Yeah, well, less is more. I think that's true, and that's true for instrumentalists too, as far as I tell piano students who want to play jazz, for instance, that very often less is more, because the tendency for all of us is to overdo if we're not careful anyway. You know.
How about comping a singer?
Yeah, accompanying, and it's really important too for the accompanist to know the song well themselves, if it's at all possible, and have some feeling for the lyrics.
Yes, please. Thank you for bringing lyrics up.
And
then we have to breathe once in a while. You know?
And so you have to develop a sensitivity to the people you're backing, and some are going to know more themselves musically than others. You know, some are experienced musicians themselves, the singers I'm talking about, and some are novices who don't have that experience. So if you're going to try to accompany someone at that level, a young person that hasn't really had that much experience, then you have to adjust for that as well. But anyway, it's important to understand the songs, so that you're not just playing stuff that really has nothing to do with the lyrics and the story of the song.
That, you know, I hadn't really even put that together when you say that the instrumentalist should know the lyrics.
If possible, you know.
To the song. I mean, for a singer, that's all we have. We're storytellers, and so when we're telling our story lyrically, right,
what's happening underneath us with the band and the accompaniment needs to blend. And, having the lyrics readily. And I don't think a lot of instrumentalists or accompanists even really bother to think about that. And that's such an important part. Thank you for bringing that up. So you guys out there, you better know the lyrics. If I've got to remember the lyrics, so do you.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that. Yeah. You're not going to know all the lyrics to every song, but that's a goal to try to reach, because it makes all the difference, and it's certainly true for the vocalists. I mean, sometimes inexperienced.
They don't know what they're singing about. Who are they singing it to?
They're singing words, but they're not. Right. There's a fine line. You can be over theatrical and get too emotional, but somewhere in between, you want to, find that happy medium.
Yeah. Well, my very first singer's process is all about interpretation, and what I tell people to do is to handwrite out for a vocalist, handwrite out the lyrics. And just speak them as if they're dialogue. That's going to immediately change your phrasing. Mm-hmm. Sure, you want to stay within the meter of the song and so on. But when you understand what you're talking about, what you're speaking about, whether it's love or community, or love found, love lost, waiting for love, whatever it might be, waiting for a bus, whatever, you have to have that interpretation and then just free flow with it. And it's going to change every single time, unless you're doing a theater show, then it's the same thing every night.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Pretty much. But I tell people, write it out, and I say, you're just singing words. Who are you singing this to?
Yeah.
What are you singing about?
I've never really thought about it from that angle, but
I do that all the time.
Sense,
I do that all the time because there's always golden nuggets when you write something down and then you just speak it.
Well, especially when they're great songs with great lyricists, which is not always
the case. Ooh baby, ooh baby. Okay, how do you want me to phrase that one?
and mean it.
And mean it, that's right. How long do you want the baby?
Yeah.
But when you're talking about Gershwin and Cole Porter and all these wonderful...
Johnny Mercer and the great lyricists.
Yeah, they don't, as I say, they're not writing them like that anymore. Dang, and they should.
There are, some every now and then.
Every now and then there's something good.
Pop out,
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about the different process that, for instance, working with somebody like Mel Tormey? He's one of for me as a vocalist, he's one of my favorites.
Oh, he's marvelous.
Yeah, I mean,
marvelous intonation and everything that could go on and on. I recorded with him an album.
Right.
It was a big band album, and I was
nice.
just in the band. Primary interaction with Mel Tormey was just in a recording studio. I think a couple of days we worked on it.
Yeah.
This was back when I was just freshly moved to Hollywood and LA, and it was one of my first professional jobs, I think. We've all really admired him. He was such a wonderful singer and impeccable intonation, as I said. And
loved his
wonderful.
His arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
His arrangements just.
And he was a drummer.
Always, yeah.
He had been a drummer a long time, so he kind of came at it from a musician standpoint too, which is always good, I think.
Yes, I believe that every singer should pick up an instrument, whatever it is, whether it's guitar, learn a little piano, whatever it might be. And the same for an instrumentalist, especially for an accompanist. Sing a little bit, see how the other half lives.
Yeah, that's true.
And I
you
think
obviously
that
haven't
makes...
heard me sing. So.
I'll have to ask Holly.
Anyway.
The shower concerts. I used to do that when I was a kid. I would sing in the shower for forever, and my mother would literally, get out, and then she'd go turn the hot water off on the hot water heater until it got cold. I'd be in there for like 40 minutes entertaining the neighborhood, singing my lungs out in the shower.
Well, it paid off, apparently.
Yes, it did, it did. I hope so. But no, I feel that Because you learn how the other half lives. You know, you walk a few steps in someone else's shoes when you understand what the vocalist needs to and is going through, and what an accompanist is needs from a vocalist and what they're going through. That, you know, I work with some people that they're playing and they're just somewhat overrunning the vocal.
Oh, sure.
You know, and it's like, that's where that less is more comes in, or please, I need to breathe before this next phrase. Or they start speeding up in the tune.
Well,
After the instrumental solo, you know, you come back in and you're like, oh, this one's a little brisk.
yeah, that can happen too, unfortunately.
Yeah. What are some of the differences between the people that you've worked with? Were there, granted they were all consummate professionals and top of their field and extremely talented, but was their approach different? You say Ella's she was quieter, you know, more of an introvert off stage. Did like Jim Christy or anyone else, like, did they work with you more like, oh, this is what I need from you, and this more of a communication in any way, or how did they approach the rehearsal process, for instance?
Well, June, I worked with her off and on for I guess a year and a half, something like that. She was great. We had a few rehearsals, and then we never did really rehearse again. We just went out and did it. And she was very, very easy. The musicians, of course, all loved her. She'd been with Stan Kenton's band, you know, and she had some smarts as far as...
Yeah, and she had a lovely smoky quality to her voice.
It was marvelous, yeah. It was just marvelous. Sarah was very... Sarah was not a quiet type, you know. She was a really fun and liked to laugh and was very outgoing. She... again, really, we just were kind of a match right away. When I went to work with her, we had a few rehearsals at her home in LA before we actually went out on tour. She was much more an outgoing personality, you know, than say Ella Fitzgerald, for instance.
Would she mingle with the musicians and just kind of hang?
Yeah, she was kind of more one of the guys, and
I think you told me a long time ago. I think tell me if this is correct. You told me a little anecdote where she said, you know, I go out looking like Lena Horne.
Oh yeah, she used that line a lot.
But I come back at the end of the night looking like Sarah Vaughan.
Sarah Vaughan, yeah. Well, she really perspired. You know, some singers do and some don't, or hardly. But it is a problem for some singers, male and female. I think, you know, if you're
some of those hot lights.
If you're a perspirer and you're working under hot lights and you know, being on stage
and just the adrenaline and the energy.
Yeah, and that as well. Sure.
You know, that cooks up inside of your body.
Yeah.
And then just kind of comes out of your pores.
Yeah. Well, she would really perspire on stage because she worked hard.
Yeah.
And that was one of her favorite lines. I come out here looking like Lena. Well, how does it start? I feel like looking like Lena Horne.
I start out looking like Lena Horne. I come back looking like Sarah Vaughan.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
So let's talk about introductions to a song. What's your approach on that?
I try to keep it relatively simple. It's nothing more than just the 3 or 4 notes. Or if the song is a different kind of a mood or whatever, you know, it might be quite a few bars of introduction. You just have to use your own judgment as to what the song calls for. And of course,
you set the mood.
Yeah, set the mood. Sometimes it's great for singers to start on their own and
Yeah.
without any accompaniment. That's always very effective, or at least in many cases.
When you're working with these people and you're on tour, you must have the arrangements. After a while, the arrangements are just in your head. You don't have to look at any sheet music. But in the process of an evening, would you just kind of like everybody just goes off script and just has a good time with the music? Or were there, for instance, did some people pretty much stay to the ink and do the song as arranged? Or were there other vocalists that you work with that said, I'm calling the tune, let's go for it and let's see what happens?
Well, I guess a little of both. The singers that you're talking about, it depends on how much experience they've had and how comfortable they are with in their own skin,
Yeah.
And if they're nervous and going to pieces themselves, obviously which occasionally happens, particularly with a novice singer that's just kind of getting started and getting some experience. You have to be a little more sensitive to helping them sometimes.
Has anyone ever jumped off the deep end? I mean, just all of a sudden lost themselves. Where am I in this song? I mean, I think that's happened to all of us, but it's kind of like, you zone out for a moment and it's like, did I just miss my entrance, or where am I? What song is this?
Well, fortunately,
how do you pull somebody back?
The names that I've mentioned, people like Sarah or any of the marvelous singers we've been talking about, that's not going to be a factor really. I mean, but I've been in situations with singers that didn't know me and I didn't know them, and we were maybe just going through something for the first time, and I might have had to be reading it before I really memorized it or whatever. And sometimes you can't help them very much, no matter how hard you try. But when you're working with professionals that have had some experience and know what they're doing and have the confidence, then you really don't have to worry about it. And that's when you really, I think the less is more really comes into play, where you don't have to support a vocalist with too much stuff.
Right.
I mean, occasionally, if someone is singing a song, for instance, that really calls for a lot of orchestral stuff going on behind them, I can't really think of an example right now, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
Something where it's appropriate, then you can be more orchestral and really
more lush. Usually, I think that
fuller two-handed
might
approach.
be sometimes even with a ballad.
Yeah.
That big build up.
Yeah,
to
sure.
whatever's happening emotionally with the song.
Yeah.
But I think it's the relationship that you bring out the best in one another.
Ideally.
And you give each other space to be creative, and opposed to, okay, this is the way I want it, which is fine. But if something happens on stage because it's live, then you kind of go with it and you complement one another. I think the relationship between a singer and an accompanist, that connection and that communication musically is when you find it, it's brilliant. It really is, and it's rare. If you're able to work with the same person, that's great, but a lot of times you're working with different people all the time, and you might be singing the same song that you enjoy singing. This is part of my set list, this is what I do. But all of a sudden it takes on a totally different flavor when you've got somebody else sitting at the piano.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And that could be great as well. I think you learn from everybody. The good bits, maybe the not so good bits, but I think you learn from all of it.
That's very true.
All the experiences that you've had as not only as an instrumentalist, but accompanying and conducting for these icons of the American music scene. over the years has just been great. So I want to thank you, Mike, for sharing
My
some
pleasure,
time with
Lillian.
me
Yeah, thank you. I
and
hope
us
this-
here at the Singer's Process.
I hope this helped. Hello?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's some wonderful gems that we can talk about, that we've talked about today. So thank you so much for being here and taking the time with me to be with me and talk about the Singer's Process and all those wonderful things.
My pleasure. We must do this again.
Yes, we must, right? Bring out the wine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we may never, never, never meet again on that rocky road to love. But I'll always, always keep that memory of the way you hold your knife, the way it turns to three, the way you changed my life. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. My pleasure, Lily. Sounded good, baby.